Hello folks, Larry here again with Curio Mechanics. Let me start off by apologizing again for the air conditioning noise you may hear in the background. It's just too darn hot and I'm not gonna sit here and cook. I apologize, but it is what it is. In today's video, I'm going to try to do a deep dive into the world of artificial intelligence. How it works, what it can and can't do, and what effect it may have on those of us who interact with it. AI is everywhere these days. It has become one of the buzzwords that a lot of companies have slapped on almost everything imaginable. But what does it actually mean? Let's start with my own humble opinion. AI has been in our homes for well over 100 years. We just didn't call it that. Let's take the thermostat on the wall. It can sense the temperature of the air around it and carry out its instruction of directing the heating and cooling systems to maintain the conditions it's told. This is, by my definition, is artificial intelligence. Another example would be a building sprinkler system. It monitors its environment, and when certain conditions are met, it can actuate the necessary valves and pipes to hopefully put out the fire. This is another example of a self-aware system that is using data to make a decision based on prearranged criteria. Again, these things are so commonplace, we don't even give them a second thought. In 1950, Alan Turing came up with a test that was used in the definition of artificial intelligence. Called the Turing test, it involves two humans and an AI system. One human acts as a judge and has a text terminal connection to the other human and the AI. The judge texts with each individual and then has to decide if the two conversations make it obvious which one is the AI. To succeed, the AI has to be essentially indistinguishable from a human conversation. This test has been applied successfully to many AI systems and has more recently been improved and changed to allow more meaningful results. NASA has a more nuanced definition that adds in the capability of adapting itself based on prior experience and data. In my opinion, we've now moved to the newer smart thermostats. NASA goes further, however, to include the properties of human-like cognition, planning, and understanding of a task. This is a slippery slope because modern AI can mimic human perception and reasoning, but uses such a radically different method that although the results can appear human, it can also arrive at wildly different outcomes and decisions. Let's take a closer look at how AI works to understand what I mean. The modern AI systems work by recognizing patterns. The data set that any given AI uses is called the model. To create a model, a very large amount of raw data is fed into an algorithm that is designed to recognize associations and patterns. There are a few different ways of creating these patterns. One of them allows the system to try to complete a missing piece of any given pattern, then a score is calculated based on how closely the model predicted the missing information. As the model grows in size and relationships, its goal is to maximize the score. In other words, it's got to get better at guessing. An example would be asking the AI how to finish the sentence. A cat sat on a blank, and grade its answer on how close it got to the answer, Matt. Another way to train a model is to directly feed associations into it. In programming terms, these would be key and value pairs. An example would be 1 equals number, 2 equals number, 1 plus 2 equals 3, and so on. A different way I've seen mentioned is called reinforced learning, which is to reward the system for a correct answer and punish it for incorrect answers. Since I'm assuming this is based on something like an arbitrary value instead of lollipops and vinegar, it to me seems a lot like the first example I gave where the system tries to achieve the most accurate results. A real-world example I ran across in my research would be shown to show the model various x-rays, then give it a real doctor's diagnosis and allow it continue to more accurately form its own diagnosis. In the Microsoft paper I read on the subject, modern AI, also called large language models, are based entirely on pattern matching. Let's think for a minute about what that means compared to human intelligence. When a person approaches a problem, they will call on past experience for information, but the decision is not based on that alone. We have at least 5 senses, and I'd add emotion, the sense of time, and intuition into the mix to have at least 8 pieces of data that we can call on about any given subject or experience to apply to a decision. Modern AI really only has one sense at its core: yes or no, on or off. While it can record any of a myriad of sensor data to process, it is still going to be observed in a binary format. The wire is on or off. The condition is met or unmet. The sensor is above or below its threshold. In classical industrial control, there's a system called PID, which stands for Peripheral Integral Differential, which is a clever way for better management of physical devices like motors. It works by asking a few different questions. How far am I from the target? How much energy do I want to apply to achieve the target? How far from the target can I deviate before I apply more energy to correct the deviation? I learned about this system when I was learning to build and fly quadcopters. The same technique is used to control the motors, and tuning them led me down a pretty deep rabbit hole learning about it. Changing these variables greatly affected how the quadcopter handled and responded. I have great respect for people who do this professionally, as it is truly part art and part science. If you ever crash your quadcopter, just blame it on bad tuning. So why do I bring up PID? Simply because it is a very elegant example of turning a yes-no system into one that behaves, air quotes, intelligently. This to me is another example of how artificial intelligence has been right under our noses for decades. The system can mimic cognition by a sentient control, but is in fact just a smart use of math to behave in a way that gives the best results. What most computer scientists would say distinguishes modern AI from its more primitive predecessors is the ability to learn. Let's talk a little bit about what exactly that means. Learning is basically the ability to retain information and act on it in future situations. In this sense, AI is capable of learning. It is also gifted with a perfect memory as opposed to our often faulty data storage. False memories are able to be created and happen naturally all the time. So which system of learning is better? Well, let's go back to what I said earlier. A sentient being, be it human or animal, has the ability to record several different values simultaneously, as well as interpret these values from a variety of standpoints. What is easier? What is the most satisfying? What is the most reliable? And probably for this discussion, the most relevant, is it right or wrong? While a computer can be given a sense of what is and isn't acceptable to society and the law, it cannot make an independent judgment of morality. It also cannot form its own sense of morality outside of the data it has been directly exposed to while its learning system is engaged. I strongly suspect that an AI system you'll run into in the wild has already had its associations and patterns put into read-only mode. This is probably a good thing, as otherwise the model would become contaminated by the type of people or devices that interact with it. Imagine a counseling program installed at a prison. I'm sure in no time flat it would be convinced that it's perfectly fine to do all sorts of unspeakable things. This also leads into another important phase of training any AI system, and that is human tweaking of the resulting database of associations. This is basically someone or something going through everything it's learned and giving it the sniff test. In AI models, a problem called hallucination is very common. This is simply a model giving you either a flat-out wrong or misguided answer. In my own experience with AI, this has happened quite often. I've fried more than one computer by using the information I was given from AI. I specifically asked for factual information, not opinion or conjecture. I was cautious to ask the right question of simply, tell me how this is. But as I said on several occasions, was given an answer that was blatantly incorrect. So much so that now when I ask AI a question, I tend to think the real answer is the opposite of what it tells me. From an infrastructure standpoint, dedicated AI machines have a huge environmental footprint. I've heard Microsoft negotiated to use the nuclear reactor at 3 Mile Island on the East Coast to power its AI machines. With a more traditional data center, the bulk of the consumption is for cooling water, environmental control, and storage. A corporate scale AI uses all of this, plus adds the power consumption of many CPUs, or more recently neural processing units called NPUs, on top of all the needs of a data center. Because the processing is many million cycles in parallel, the bulk of the consumption is released as heat, and the cooling requirements are orders of magnitude higher. You can run your own AI models on your home computer, and I will touch on that a bit later, but the response time and the depth of knowledge is significantly worse than the big ones most of us have heard of. Does that mean AI is useless or broken? Not really. It has many solid use cases that shine. Its main strength is, as Microsoft stated, pattern recognition. If you've got an enormous amount of data to analyze, AI can do it in what seems like the blink of an eye. It's also got a careful eye for detail. If I had to look at the spending habits of every customer on Amazon, I'd get to about page 3 and then start suffering brain mush so bad I'd be useless. I also think AI can be a great resource for teaching some subjects. If a 7-year-old needs help with their math homework, a patient, calm, and thorough explanation can go a long way to help. On the flip side, the ability to mimic human interaction can be a bit dangerous if misunderstood. I've heard it has become a friend to many lonely and depressed people. This concerns me, simply because if you're not interacting with other people regularly, talking to a box or phone is only going to make the problem worse. This is also true for medical and mental health advice. The well-meaning AI assistant does not have any sense of what implication its advice may lead to. Its model is trained from sources that are the most knowledgeable and rational, but it is dealing with scenarios that are anything but rational. While it may be able to happily recite the list of ailments with the same symptoms, it may not be able to distinguish between common, uncommon, or unheard of outcomes. Another place I think AI is very detrimental is using it for school research and reports. As I get further in life, I've realized that one of the most important skills I have learned is how to learn. The process of seeking, digesting, and retaining information is critical to allowing oneself to tackle new and unfamiliar things which seem to be everywhere. The only thing that doesn't change is that things change. Being able to handle these situations with confidence, poise, and efficiency will give anybody a great outlook for the future. So now that we've talked about a bit about what AI is, what it can and can't do, let's tackle the big question. Is it good or bad? I will fully acknowledge that this part is entirely my opinion. If you ask a Wall Street analyst or an assembly line worker who just lost their job to a robot, you're definitely going to get two totally different answers. Here's my answer. Humankind is not ready for the type of processing power and interactions AI can afford. But this presents a fantastic opportunity for us to grow and learn. We weren't ready for the raw destructive power of nuclear weapons, but introducing them into the world permanently changed how we interacted with each other. AI will have the same effect, in my opinion, even if everything it told us from this point on was wrong. Just learning to sift good information from bad and learning to educate ourselves independently so that we can give the answers our own sniff test will make civilization as a whole stronger and better. Another challenge AI has presented to our civilization is the incredible accuracy at which it can reproduce art and voices. Scammers have a very powerful way to trick the average person, and that needs to be dealt with soon. Banks and other institutions like healthcare need to do the heavy lifting of protecting the average user from these types of attacks. Two-part authentication is a helpful start, but there's still much more work that needs to be done. In the art world, the human artist now has to compete with a new threat that can generate almost any asset in a matter of seconds with a surprisingly high level of quality. If society chooses to accept these new electronic creators, it will make starving artists even more starving. The thing to remind ourselves of, though, is that these tools are being used by people. They do not exist in a vacuum. Bad actors are in every corner of the world, and it's up to us to flush them out and prevent them from having the ability to use such exquisite tools to apply their craft. We need to work together with law enforcement, international government, and surveillance entities to shield viable attack vectors as much as possible. In the long run, this will benefit the average consumer by bringing a more safe and secure approach to all of our sensitive data. This will also help drive innovation in the hardware and software fields to try to keep a step ahead of the bad guys. This is probably going to be a very long war against the current threats, let alone the ones to come. But I strongly believe the human race is more than capable of rising to the challenge and being successful in the long run. I did mention a bit ago that it is entirely possible to run your very own AI model at home. I've used an open source system called Ollama, spelled Ollama. It is very user-friendly and free. The first thing you'll notice, however, that it isn't really real-time. It is normal on larger models for it to take anywhere from seconds to minutes to get a response, and when you do, it will be typed out pretty slowly. As you experiment with it, you'll gain more respect for the amount of horsepower that is thrown at the big-name commercial models. Setting it up is very easy, but I won't give you direct instructions as it depends entirely on what operating system you're running it on. I will, however, tell you that I ran it on an 80 logical CPU server with 256 gigabytes of RAM with GPU acceleration, and was only able to get about a 32 gigatoken model to run in anything considered satisfactory performance. This isn't really much, but if you're curious and patient, it is still extremely satisfying to get going. In conclusion, I think AI right now is a bubble, similar to the early internet.com craze. I also think it will have a similar outcome where, despite the amount of insane resources being thrown at it now, it will start to settle down, and while it will continue to exist, it won't be slapped on every label imaginable just to sell more products. For those of us who feel threatened by AI, I would just say this. Remember, it takes a nuclear power plant to run an AI, but you and I can do the same amount of computing, if not more, on a meatball sandwich and a cup of coffee, and I personally find that more amazing and comforting. So that's it for this dive into the world of AI. If you made it to this part in the video, I thank you very, very much. I'm still struggling to get my YouTube watch hours up, so feel free to share this with anyone you think might find it interesting. Also, be sure to have a gentle talk with those people in your life who might be a bit more susceptible to AI augmented attacks. If your parents send you a video of a roller skating horse or cats doing a podcast, it might be time to explain that not everything is what it seems. I hope this helps shed some light behind the magic curtain, and most of all, I hope you enjoy your day.